The Curse of From did not begin when the first monsters appeared. It began much earlier. And if Season 4 is telling us the truth, then the town was never simply a prison designed to trap random people. The prison came later. The monsters came later. Even the cycle of reincarnation came later. The real beginning was a choice. A choice made by people who believed they could trade something terrible for something they wanted more. And that changes almost everything we thought we knew about Fromville. Because look at what Season 4 keeps putting in front of us. Jade and Tabitha discover that their connection to the town is not new. They have been part of this story before. Again and again. The same pattern keeps returning, even when the faces change. Jade remembers fragments through previous lives. Tabitha carries memories that belong to Miranda. Julie can move through different points in the story. And somewhere above all of it stands the man in yellow, watching the consequences unfold. That is not random mythology. It is a system. And my theory is simple. The curse began with a failed attempt to defeat death. Not escape the town. Not summon monsters. Not create a magical prison. Defeat death. And the people who attempted it discovered something much worse than immortality. They discovered that the town could preserve a promise forever. But it could also preserve a punishment forever. That distinction is the key to understanding everything. Because Season 4 makes one thing increasingly difficult to ignore. The town reacts to human choices. It does not behave like an ordinary location. It behaves like something that remembers. When people try to understand it, the environment answers. When they attempt to escape, the road returns them. When they discover something they were never supposed to discover, the rules change. And when someone gets dangerously close to the truth, the town does not simply kill them. Sometimes it gives them another role. That is much more disturbing. Because if this place were only trying to kill everyone, there would be no reason for reincarnation. There would be no reason for Jade and Tabitha to return. There would be no reason for Julie to interact with the past. There would be no reason for memories to survive across generations. The curse needs people to remember. And that means the memories are not a side effect. They are part of the mechanism. This is where Jade becomes incredibly important. For years, Jade looked like the character who is simply obsessed with solving the puzzle. But what if that obsession is actually inherited? What if Jade is not discovering the mystery for the first time? What if something inside him is remembering it? Season 4 pushes this idea much further by connecting Jade to previous incarnations and showing that his visions are not meaningless hallucinations. His mushroom experience becomes especially important because it forces him to confront the possibility that his connection to the town existed before his current identity. That is the detail everyone missed. Jade does not simply want answers. Something in him seems desperate to finish something that began long before he was born. And Tabitha has the same problem. She does not simply discover that she was Miranda. She discovers that Miranda was already trying to understand the same impossible place. The same symbols. The same children. The same bottle tree. The same cycle. And now we have to ask the dangerous question. Why would the town keep bringing the same two people back? There is only one explanation that fits the pattern. They are not being randomly reincarnated. They are being returned because they failed. And this is where the entire curse begins to look different. Maybe the first people who entered this supernatural system were not innocent victims. Maybe they were participants. Maybe they made a bargain. Imagine a group of people facing the most basic fear humans have ever had: death. They discover that something exists beyond death. A force. A place. A ritual. A doorway. And they believe they can use it. But every supernatural bargain has a price. If they wanted their loved ones to survive, perhaps someone had to be sacrificed. If they wanted death reversed, perhaps another life had to be destroyed. And if they wanted eternity, perhaps they had to create a cycle where the dead could never truly leave. That would explain the children. Because the children are not simply victims placed inside a random horror story. They appear connected to the oldest layer of the mystery. Their deaths are treated as something foundational. Something so important that the entire supernatural structure seems to have grown around them. Season 4 takes us directly toward that buried history. Jade and Tabitha's search eventually leads toward the bones beneath the tunnels, while the bottle tree becomes part of the larger attempt to understand the system. And here's what changes everything. If the children were part of the beginning, then the monsters may not be the original evil. They may be the result. The curse could have started with an act committed against the children.
Something happened to them.
Something transformed their deaths into the foundation of Fromville. And the people responsible did not simply create monsters. They created repetition. That would explain why the town keeps recycling its victims. Why certain souls return. Why certain characters appear connected across different eras. Why escaping the physical location never seems to solve the deeper problem. Because the prison is not the town. The prison is the cycle. The town is only where the cycle becomes visible. And this is where the man in yellow becomes terrifying. For most of the series, the monsters seem to represent the highest level of danger. They came at night. They smiled. They manipulated people. They knew things they should not know. But Season 4 changes the hierarchy. The man in yellow does not feel like another monster. He feels like someone who understands the rules. He knows what the characters are trying to discover. He knows what they have done before. And most importantly, he appears when the characters are getting close to information that could break the cycle. That makes his role much darker. What if he is not the creator of the curse? What if he is its guardian? There is a difference. A creator wants something to exist. A guardian wants something to continue. And if the curse began with an ancient bargain, then the man in yellow may exist for one purpose: to make sure the bargain is never truly broken. That would also explain why knowledge itself becomes dangerous. Every answer has a consequence. Every discovery changes the behavior of the town. Every attempt to escape creates another problem. The characters believe they are solving a puzzle, but perhaps they are actually completing one. That is the terrifying possibility. Maybe the town does not hide its history because it wants people to remain ignorant. Maybe it reveals the history slowly because it needs someone to reach the final decision. Someone has to finish what the original people started. And if Jade and Tabitha are reincarnations of the people connected to the beginning, then they may be the only ones capable of ending it. But there is one problem. They may also be the reason it continues. Because what if every attempt to save the children is exactly what keeps the cycle alive? What if the characters have spent 4 seasons fighting the consequences of a decision they have unknowingly repeated over and over again? That would make the bottle tree more than a mysterious symbol. It would become a marker, a doorway, a memory, and perhaps even a warning. The town is not asking them to find the way out. It is forcing them to remember why they were trapped in the first place. And once they remember everything, they will have to make the same choice that started the curse. Except this time, there may be no second chance. Because Season 4 has already shown us that the town is becoming more aggressive as the truth gets closer. The closer the residents move toward answers, the more dangerous the consequences become. That is not coincidence. That is the curse protecting itself. And if this theory is correct, then the monsters are only the surface. The real enemy is the promise that created Fromville. A promise made so long ago that even the people who made it have forgotten their own names. But their souls have not forgotten. Jade remembers. Tabitha remembers. Julie can reach the past. Victor carries memories he cannot fully explain. And the town remembers all of them, which means there is only one question left. If the curse began with a choice to defeat death, who made that choice first? And what exactly did they sacrifice to make it work? Because the answer may reveal something even worse. The first monster may not have been created by the curse. The first monster may have been the person who started it. The first monster may not have been created by the curse. The first monster may have been the person who started it. And if that sounds impossible, look at what the story has been quietly doing with the idea of sacrifice. Because the children are the key. Not the talismans. Not the trees. Not the tunnels. The children. Everything keeps circling back to them. And once you understand why, the history of Fromville becomes much darker. The most important question is not simply why the children died. It is why their deaths mattered so much that reality itself seems to have been damaged by them. That is the difference between a murder and a curse. A murder ends with death. A A curse begins with it. And this is where the theory becomes much stronger. The people connected to the children may have believed they were saving themselves from death. But instead of defeating death, they created a world where death could never finish its work. That would explain the endless cycle. People die. People return. People remember. People repeat. And the town continues. It is almost as if the supernatural force behind Fromville does not want the characters dead. It wants them repeating the same story. That distinction changes the meaning of the monsters completely. Think about how the monsters behave. They do not behave like wild predators.
They talk.
They smile. They wait. They manipulate. They recognize fear. And sometimes they seem strangely familiar with the people they hunt. That is not the behavior of something that simply wants to feed. It is the behavior of something that understands the rules of the game. The monsters know that humans will eventually make mistakes. They know people will open doors. They know people will trust the wrong person. They know people will become desperate. And most importantly, they know that fear makes people repeat patterns. But here's what changes everything. What if the monsters are not independent creatures at all? What if they are people who have already completed the cycle? That would explain their human appearance. It would explain their personalities. It would explain their ability to communicate. And it would explain why they seem almost frozen in a particular era. They are not monsters that evolved naturally. They are people who became part of the system. And if that is true, then becoming a monster may be the final punishment. You don't simply die in Fromville. You risk becoming part of it. That makes every death more frightening, because the characters may believe they are fighting monsters outside themselves. But the town may be showing them their possible future. Die incorrectly, and you become part of the machine. Escape the cycle, and perhaps you finally become free. But there is another layer. The man in yellow. His appearance is important because he does not resemble the creatures we have already seen. He feels different. The monsters operate like hunters. He operates like an administrator. And that difference may tell us where he sits in the hierarchy. If the curse began with a bargain, someone had to enforce the bargain. Someone had to make sure the sacrifice remained meaningful. Someone had to stop the people inside the cycle from discovering the original truth. That could be the man in yellow. Not necessarily the god of Fromville. Not necessarily the creator. But the personification of the original agreement. A living reminder that the debt has not been paid. And suddenly, his relationship with knowledge becomes extremely important. The characters discover something. The town responds. They uncover another piece. Something attacks. They find a new passage. The rules change. It is almost as if the system itself is watching the investigation. That is why the supernatural elements never feel completely random. There is structure beneath the chaos. And that structure may be based on one simple rule. The truth can be discovered, but it cannot be escaped without a price. This is why Jade is so important. Jade's entire personality revolves around solving problems. He sees patterns where other people see chaos. But the irony is that his greatest strength may also be his weakness. The town knows exactly how to control him. Give him one unexplained symbol, one impossible vision, one missing piece. And Jade will keep digging. He will risk himself. He will risk others. He will follow the mystery wherever it goes.
Why?
Because somewhere inside him, the older version of Jade already knows that this story must be completed. He may not consciously remember the previous lives, but something underneath his identity does. That is why his visions feel less like predictions and more like fragments of memory. He isn't seeing something that might happen. He is remembering something that already happened. And that distinction is enormous. Because if Jade is remembering the past, then the events we thought were happening for the first time may actually be repetitions. The same people, the same choices, the same mistakes, different faces, different decades, same story. And Tabitha fits perfectly into that pattern. Her connection to the children has never felt accidental. She is repeatedly drawn toward them. She sees them. She hears them. She follows clues connected to them. And even when she leaves the town, the mystery does not release her. That is because she is not simply a victim. She is part of the unresolved event. Her soul is carrying unfinished business. And this is where the story becomes psychological rather than purely supernatural. Imagine being trapped in a nightmare that you have lived before. You do not remember the first version, but your instincts do. You walk into a room and feel that something is wrong. You see an object and feel that you have seen it before. You meet someone and feel an inexplicable connection. You don't know why, but your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. That is exactly what Fromville seems to do. It attacks memory, but it also preserves it. And that contradiction may be the entire point. The characters must remember enough to break the curse. But if they remember too much too quickly, the town destroys them. That is why Victor is so important. Victor survived the earliest known period of the town's nightmare. He has lived with the mystery longer than almost anyone. But he also has enormous gaps in his memory. At first, that seems like trauma, and it probably is. But what if the memory loss is supernatural protection? What if Victor's mind erased the truth because the truth itself was dangerous? This would explain why objects matter so much to him. Lunchbox, drawings, trees, places. He stores memories outside his mind because his mind cannot safely hold everything. That makes Victor's drawings more important than simple illustrations. They may be a map of a reality he cannot consciously explain. And the same pattern appears again. The town hides its truth inside symbols. The bottle tree, the children, the numbers, the tunnels, the drawings, the recurring faces. The symbols are not decoration. They are fragments, pieces of one enormous memory. But here is the darkest possibility. What if the characters are not trying to discover who cursed the town? What if they are trying to discover why they cursed themselves? That would explain the reincarnation cycle perfectly. The people connected to the original event are not simply prisoners. They are participants who keep being brought back because the original decision remains unfinished. Jade and Tabitha keep returning because they are connected to the original choice. The children remain trapped because their deaths created the debt. The monsters exist because someone paid the wrong price. And the man in yellow exists because the agreement is still active. Everything points back to the same moment. One decision, one sacrifice, one broken promise. And if that is true, then the biggest mistake the characters have made is assuming that escaping Fromville is the ultimate goal. It isn't, because even if they leave the physical town, the curse can follow them. Tabitha already proves that. She escaped. But the mystery did not disappear. Instead, it followed her into the outside world. That tells us something terrifying. Fromville is not a location. It is a condition, a supernatural state that can exist beyond the boundaries of the town. The road does not create the prison. The cycle creates the prison. And once you're part of the cycle, distance means nothing. This is why the lighthouse matters. This is why the trees matter. This is why the faraway tree can send someone somewhere completely unexpected. The town does not obey normal geography because it is not operating according to normal geography. It operates according to memory, choice, and consequence. And that gives us the real meaning of the trees. They may not be transportation systems. They may be connections between moments. A tree can move someone because the curse itself does not recognize time the way humans do. Past, present, future. To the system, they may all exist simultaneously, which means Julie's ability to move through time is not an unrelated supernatural power. It may be evidence that the curse has always been built around time. And this is where the entire theory reaches its most dangerous point. If Julie can move through the story, if Jade and Tabitha can return through different lives, if Victor remembers fragments from decades ago, then someone may eventually reach the exact moment when the curse began. Not a memory, not a vision, the actual beginning. And when that happens, they may finally discover the original sacrifice. But what if the sacrifice was not one person? What if it was a promise made by an entire group? What if they chose the children because they believed sacrificing them would guarantee immortality? Then the monsters suddenly make sense. They are not random demons. They are the corrupted survivors of that bargain. And the children are not simply ghosts. They are the victims whose deaths keep the bargain alive. That means every night the monsters hunt, the town is replaying the original crime. Every time someone dies, the system receives another reminder of the sacrifice. Every time someone survives, the cycle continues. The horror is not repeating because the town enjoys suffering. It is repeating because the curse has never reached its final condition. Something is still missing. Something has to happen before the cycle can end. And the man in yellow may know exactly what it is. Because his real purpose may not be to kill the residents. It may be to make one of them repeat the original choice. Choose the sacrifice. Choose the children. Choose survival. Choose the curse. And if that happens, everything begins again. But there is one person who may be capable of stopping it. Not Jade. Not Tabitha. Not Victor. Julie. Because Julie is the one character who can potentially interact with the story itself. And if the curse is built around repetition, then the only way to defeat it may be to change the one event that has always remained the same. The beginning. Not the ending. The beginning. Because maybe the way out of Fromville was never hidden somewhere in the forest. Maybe it exists in the past. And if someone can reach the moment the curse was created, they may finally have the chance to make one different choice. But there is a terrifying problem. If you change the beginning, you may erase everything that came after it. And that means saving the children could come at a price no one in Fromville is prepared to pay. Because what if the town, the monsters, the reincarnations, and even the people fighting the curse all exist because of that one original decision? Then breaking the curse doesn't simply mean escaping. It means destroying the entire story. And the next question becomes almost impossible to ignore. If the curse can be broken by changing the past, why has no one succeeded after all these cycles? Unless someone already tried and failed. And the evidence of that failure may be hiding in the one place everyone has been looking at without understanding what they are actually seeing. The evidence of the first failed attempt may have been in front of us the entire time. The bottle tree, the drawings, the tunnels, the children, the repeated faces, the strange symbols. We have been treating these things as separate mysteries. But what if they are all pieces of the same event? And what if that event is not something that happened inside the curse? What if it is the moment the curse was created? That is where the entire story changes. Because if the cycle is built around one original decision, then every major mystery in Fromville should eventually lead back to that decision. And it does. Look at the bottle tree. At first, it seems like another supernatural object. A strange tree covered with bottles containing numbers. But the numbers are not random. They are connected to the mystery of time. And when Jade begins trying to understand them, the story stops behaving like a normal survival mystery. The bottles become evidence. Evidence that someone has been recording something. But what? Dates? Moments? Deaths? People? Or events? That question becomes even more important when we connect the bottle tree to the faraway tree. Because both trees appear to violate ordinary physical rules. One can transport people. The other appears connected to messages and numbers. That suggests the trees may be part of the same supernatural network. They are not simply objects inside the forest. They may be points where the curse touches time. And if that is true, the bottle tree could be functioning like a memory archive. A place where pieces of the past survive. Not because someone wants the residents to understand them, but because the curse cannot completely erase what happened. This would explain why the truth keeps leaking through. A symbol here, a vision there, a voice, a drawing, a recurring face, a child appearing at the exact moment someone needs to see them. The system tries to hide the past, but the past keeps returning. And that is exactly what a curse does. It does not let the original crime disappear. It forces everyone to live inside its consequences. This is why the children are so important. They represent the part of the past that refuses to stay buried. Every time they appear, they are reminding the characters that the present is built on something unfinished. And this is where the title of the entire mystery becomes meaningful. From. A word that sounds like movement. From somewhere. From someone. From something. But perhaps the deeper meaning is origin. Where did this begin? Who did it come from? What moment did everything come from? The answer may not be the town. The town may have been created as a consequence. The true beginning may have happened somewhere else. And that would explain why the characters keep finding pieces of the outside world inside the nightmare. The forest, the lighthouse, the diner, the houses, the road, the tunnels. These places feel physical, but the rules governing them are not. That means Fromville may be a supernatural reconstruction of a real event, a place created from memory, a place designed to keep the original decision alive. And if the town itself is an echo of the past, then every person inside it may be playing a role. That brings us back to Jade and Tabitha. They are not simply two people who happen to share a connection. Their repeated appearances suggest something much larger. They may represent two sides of the original decision. One searches for the truth. The other searches for the children. One wants to understand. The other wants to save. And perhaps the original cycle required both. That is why they keep finding each other. Not because the universe is romantic. Because the curse needs both halves of a story to repeat. Jade needs to discover. Tabitha needs to remember. And together, they eventually reach the same point. The children. But there's something even more disturbing. What if Jade and Tabitha have been trying to solve the wrong problem for generations? What if their previous incarnations did not fail because they were not smart enough? What if they failed because they believed the children could be saved without confronting the person who caused their deaths? That would explain why the cycle continues. They keep treating the symptoms. They fight monsters. They search for exits. They protect the town. They investigate the tunnels. But they never confront the original choice. And until that choice changes, nothing changes. This is why the man in yellow matters so much. He may be the embodiment of that original choice. The voice saying, "You wanted something. You got it. Now pay the price." His power does not necessarily come from physical strength. It comes from knowledge. He knows the rules. He knows the past. He knows what happens when people uncover certain truths. And that makes him more dangerous than the monsters. The monsters attack bodies. He attacks decisions. He waits for people to become desperate enough to make the wrong choice. That is the psychological horror at the center of From. The town does not need to force you to become evil. It only needs to give you something you desperately want. A dead child. A missing loved one. A way home. A second chance. A promise that someone you lost can return. Then it waits. Because eventually you will choose. And that choice may be exactly what the curse needs. This is why the original sacrifice may not have been forced. It may have been voluntary. And that is much worse. Imagine discovering a way to bring back the people you love. But the price is another life. Would you do it? Would you tell yourself that one innocent life is worth saving dozens? Would you convince yourself that the sacrifice is necessary? Would you believe you could control what comes afterward? That is how a curse begins. Not with evil. With love corrupted by desperation. And suddenly the children become even more tragic. Because if they were sacrificed by people who believed they were doing something necessary, then the monsters may be the punishment for that belief. The town becomes a machine that asks the same question again and again. How much are you willing to sacrifice to get what you want? Every character is tested by that question. Boyd wants to save everyone. Donna wants to protect the community. Jade wants the truth. Tabitha wants to save the children. Victor wants to preserve the people he loves. Randall wants control. Sarah wants redemption. Different desires. Same test. And the town watches. That is why From is so obsessed with choices. The supernatural events are terrifying, but the characters' decisions are what keep moving the story forward. And if the curse is a system built around choice, then there may be no physical door waiting at the end. There may be a moral decision. Someone must refuse the bargain. Someone must choose not to sacrifice another person. Someone must finally say, no, and that could be the true way out. Not defeating the monsters. Not killing the man in yellow. Not destroying the trees. Refusing to continue the original bargain. That would also explain why the children keep appearing. They may not be asking to be rescued in the normal sense. They may be waiting for someone to acknowledge what happened to them. The curse survives because the original sacrifice was never answered. The dead were never given justice. The survivors were never forced to face what they did.
So the story repeats.
Again, and again, and again, until someone finally breaks the pattern. But there is one final piece. Victor. Because Victor may be the proof that the cycle can survive for decades without losing its shape. He was there when the town was almost empty. He witnessed the aftermath. He survived when others did not. And somehow he remained. That makes his existence almost impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Victor may not know the answer, but he knows the pattern. His drawings preserve fragments of it. His memories preserve fragments of it. His survival preserves the timeline. He is the living bridge between the beginning and the present. And that means Victor may eventually realize something horrifying. The town did not change. The people did. The same story continued through different generations, which means the real curse is not attached to one location. It is attached to the people, their memories, their choices, their souls, their unfinished promises. And that brings us back to the beginning. If Jade and Tabitha are connected to the original cycle, if the children are the victims at its center, if the monsters are consequences of the original bargain, if the man in yellow protects the system, and if Julie can move through the timeline, then there is only one logical conclusion. The final battle will not happen in the forest. It will happen at the beginning. Someone will eventually reach the moment the curse was created. They will see what really happened to the children. They will see who made the bargain. They will see what was promised. And they will have one chance to change it. But changing it may have consequences. Because if the entire Fromville reality exists because of that original choice, then removing the choice could erase everything created afterward. The town could disappear. The monsters could disappear. The cycle could disappear. But so could the people who were born from that cycle. And that creates the cruelest possible ending. To save everyone, someone may have to accept that they were never supposed to exist. That is why the curse is so difficult to break. It is not simply protecting a place. It is protecting an entire history. A history built from sacrifice. And perhaps that is why the characters keep returning. They are not being punished until they die. They are being given another opportunity to make the correct choice. One final chance. One cycle after another. Until someone finally refuses to repeat the original sin. And that leaves us with the most disturbing possibility of all. Maybe the ending of From was never about finding a door out. Maybe the real ending is when someone finally understands that there was never a door. There was only a choice. The same choice that created the curse. The same choice that created the monsters. The same choice that trapped the children. The same choice that brought Jade, Tabitha, Julie, Victor, and everyone else into this nightmare. And when the final moment comes, someone will have to decide whether they are willing to sacrifice themselves to break it, or sacrifice someone else to keep it alive. Because if this theory is right, the man in yellow does not need to defeat them. He only needs one of them to make the same mistake again. And that may be the real secret of From. The curse was never designed to keep people inside. It was designed to make sure they eventually become the people who created it. And if the cycle is finally reaching its end, the question is no longer whether they can escape. The question is, who will be the first person brave enough to refuse the choice that started everything?